Welcome. This is Monty Henry, once again from DPL Surveillance Equipment. We're a full-service surveillance and security equipment company. We have lifetime guarantees and warranties on all the products. We have 24/7, 365 tech, sales, and customer support. We have perhaps the largest inventory of items that not only can you buy, but you can rent or lay away as well. We have a very extensive video library, and we have a significant number of articles, general interest articles, and articles that are very specifically oriented towards surveillance, counter-surveillance, spy phone detection, prevention of electronic harassment, targeted individuals, electrical hypersensitivity, everything you always wanted to know about spy phone interception, trackers, blockers, jammers. We have just tons of information, okay? And we have an extensive line of bug detectors, nanny cameras, anti-terrorist products, including narcotics detectors, X-ray baggage scanners, and explosive detectors as well. So come to our website, give us a call if you need anything in terms of those particular items that we just mentioned, or just want to get some education going and find out the latest and greatest as far as the state-of-the-art technology. Let us know that as well. Now, what we typically do is at least once a week, we do sessions in regards to cybersecurity. And we call them the CyberSecurity Newsflash, okay? And we basically want you guys to be able to tune in and find out and keep abreast and prepare and understand the latest threats and what you can do about it, okay? So this particular session is actually episode number 5. And episode number 5 actually has a great deal of information, so go and grab someone and make sure that that person is actually going to be helping you take notes and gather information, etc., so that you can be prepared as well. So now, let's see. This is, again, episode number 5. And as mentioned in the title, it's called, is the CIA and NSA simply in it for the money? So when I came up with that title, I basically had been reading and doing a lot of research on the NSA and the CIA in terms of generals, employees, investor relationships, etc. And it sounds like, from what I can understand, there's actually a number of instances where we have conflicts of interest when it comes to, for instance, I think from the NSA, General Keith Alexander, for instance. This is just an example. Keith Alexander, he was the chief, the NSA chief. He's accused of profiting from corporate espionage, so to speak, because in the NSA, what they typically do is they have the ability to listen in and intercept phone calls, emails, text messages, etc. And the thinking is that he actually and his team of people were actually gathering information to later maybe go and make the transition into private industry and use that same intellectual property, that same information to implement a business model that could make them tons of money. And I think his firm is making at least $1 million a month by competing now in the private sector. So again, General Keith Alexander, after leaving the NSA as the chief of the NSA rather, and he went to the private sector and started competing with his own firm. Let me see, what did he call his firm? Let's see if we can get the name of that. Let me see, blah, blah, blah. It was Iron, started his company. Let's see, okay. Anyway, after immediately stepping down from his role as chief of the NSA, he went right into the private sector and started his own firm. And again, a lot of people are suspecting that he basically used his position as chief of the NSA to to get a lot of good information and profit going into the private sector. And let's see, he called his firm, access, blah, 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 as IronNet, okay? Um, yeah, IronNet CyberSecurity Incorporated. So again, see, a lot of people are wondering because see, Keith Alexander actually didn't have a whole lot of cybersecurity experience. He wasn't exactly an expert, but he actually somehow managed to patent and actually filed these patents for certain technologies that he really didn't know a whole lot about. So a lot of people, a number of people are wondering, how did this happen? How do you patent things as your own ideas when actually you don't have any formal training in those particular areas? And for some reason, a number of experts did investigations and they can't quite figure out who on his team or whether or not Keith or anybody else had the ability to patent these certain ideas so that he can go to the private sector and keep other people from using these particular technologies that seem to have been very similar to those that are already implemented and executed in the private sector. But of course, the NSA wouldn't have any knowledge of this unless they were sort of like listening in on and intercepting phone calls, emails, text messages, etc., etc. For this particular sentence says, we're sure to raise eyebrows even higher as Alexander's announcement that he'll be filing at least 9 patents for this technology, the certain technology that this company wanted to use. Patents that you might presume were invented off the back of the intimate knowledge of cyber attacks and potential cyber threats that Alexander was exposed to during his almost 9 years as director of the NSA. When asked why he didn't implement this super special hacker catching method when running what is likely the world's largest cybersecurity body, Alexander told Harris that Harris as an interviewer, Alexander told Harris that the key aha moment came from one of his new unnamed business partners. So this sounds very shady. And again, the reason why I'm calling this Cyber Newsflash, how the NSA and the CIA are quite possibly in it for the money is because of situations like this. And another example, the CIA has an investment arm, okay, called In-Q-Tel, the letter Q -Tel. In-Q-Tel provides only limited information about its investments, and some of its trustees have ties to funded companies. Okay, the idea for a CIA-funded venture capital firm came from former CIA Director George Tenet. Okay, in the late 1990s. For instance, you guys, Forterra Systems Incorporated is a California startup focused on virtual reality. Was in need of money, and its products didn't have much commercial appeal. Then funds came in from In-Q-Tel, a venture capital firm in Virginia funded by the CIA. Okay, the investment recommendation was by a man who sat on the board of the venture capital firm. Okay, and also on the board of Forterra. So basically, you have an extension of the CIA, which is actually a venture capital firm, and they're invested in companies where some of the same individuals are sitting on the board of these companies that they're investing in. So it's like the CIA has interest in some of the same companies that they want to have receive money from this government agency that's supposed to be looking out for the taxpayers in terms of making absolutely sure there are no conflicts of interest. Okay, nearly half of In-Q-Tel's trustees have a financial connection of one kind or another with a company In-Q-Tel has funded. So it's kind of weird. In In-Q-Tel's hunt for promising technology, has led the firm on at least 17 occasions to fund businesses that had a financial link of some sort to an In-Q-Tel trustee. In 3 instances, a trustee sat on the board of a company that had an In-Q-Tel investment, as in the Forterra case. The Forterra is one company that received funding from the CIA, where actually the same individuals sat on the board of that company, like in the case of Forterra. Forterra is Forterra. So we have a seemingly conflict of interest. I'm going to read this last paragraph. In-Q-Tel uses public money to which strict conflict of interest rules apply at least $120 million a year. Say people familiar with the firm's financials. It seems it sometimes deploys this capital in ways that, even if not by intent, have the potential to benefit the firm's own trustees by virtue of other roles they have in the tech industry. Okay, so I have a LinkedIn page where we're talking about these particular types of situations where the CIA is funding their friends and partners companies where the same people sit on the board of directors as working for that particular agency, the CIA. So there's definitely something that we need to have Congress and the senators look at in terms of whether or not this is actually something that gives the CIA, as with the case of Keith Alexander. So we don't need these public spy agencies, if you will, to try and develop companies to develop products that actually compete in the private industry, because we don't know as taxpayers whether or not these guys are really going into these spy agencies for the sole purpose of coming up with a company, starting a company where you get funding from the same spy agencies so that you can go back into the private sector and make millions of dollars a month, like with Keith Alexander. So this is something we need to look at, and something we need to be aware of. So basically, that's where that goes, and that goes back to the title of the specific episode. But that's so we're going to move on and take a look at some other things that are going on in the world of cybersecurity and cyber threats. Microsoft roots out software bugs with artificial intelligence. Again, one problem that a lot of companies in Silicon Valley and everywhere else, Ford, Apple, everyone, Yahoo, they have bug bounties. Bug bounties basically allow hackers to go and find bugs and get paid a certain sum of money to find vulnerabilities and disclose them to the companies and that they're hired out to work with and work for, and then they receive compensation, right? Well, Microsoft has somehow found a way to use artificial intelligence to take a look at the software coding and basically do the same thing that the hackers are trying to do. The white hat hackers are trying to do to find the vulnerabilities, disclose them, and allow them to get fixed. So anyway, if artificial intelligence can be used to find the vulnerabilities in the software, then perhaps these extremely large projects where there's millions and millions of lines of code, perhaps the artificial intelligence can probe and ask what-if questions and do its best to try and crash applications, etc., to find these same vulnerabilities. So it's like using computers almost to analyze what the computers are doing as well. So as mentioned by some other experts in the cybersecurity space, when you write coding for video games, etc., the creativity and imagination that goes into writing and coming up with good games, etc., those are typically the areas where you find there's vulnerabilities. So if we can still have creativity and imagination injected into these video games, but have artificial intelligence take a look at the coding and test them and make sure that everything is copacetic, then we can quite possibly get better software, better applications, better apps onto the marketplace. So I think this is good news, and Microsoft calls it Project Springfield. Okay, the company is showcasing Project Springfield at its annual technology conference in Atlanta, Georgia. Is essentially an extension of so-called fuzz technology, okay, in which software is bombarded with random, unexpected inputs. Those that cause the software to crash reveal a potential vulnerability. Mr. Loden reports, it takes that approach a step further by using AI to ask a series of what-if questions in order to make more sophisticated decisions about triggering a crash, helping it find vulnerabilities other fuzz testing tools miss, and scaling the process in the cloud. Okay, he explains. So again, this was Monday, I think last Monday. Microsoft, it took a step in the direction by announcing plans to provide users with a cloud-based bug detection tool powered by artificial intelligence, the Project Springfield, which seeks to eliminate vulnerabilities in Windows, Office, and other enterprise applications, avoiding the need for costly patches later on. The Chief Information Officer Journals, Angus Loden, had an interview with Microsoft and writes a lot about this new Project Springfield situation, where they again using artificial intelligence to find vulnerabilities in software and apps, etc. And perhaps they're onto something. Let's wait and see what happens. This could be interesting. And also, Bitcoin-inspired ledger technology is taking its first steps in foreign exchange markets. Okay, now you guys, the reason why this is important is because while distributed ledgers are barely testing the waters, they could end up posing a threat to the current messaging infrastructure managed by the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, or otherwise known as SWIFT. Now, SWIFT, just in case you guys don't know, SWIFT is is used by federal banks and central banks, etc., to get money back and forth and send order information between the banks to cause money to be transferred back and forth between the banks. A cooperative society, SWIFT is a cooperative society owned by banks. SWIFT recently has been under more scrutiny after being infiltrated by thieves on at least three occasions. SWIFT says the attacks were the result of weaknesses in user security, not its core messaging network. Sure. But nonetheless has pledged to improve security. I think that's a good idea. Welcome, Mahir. Natasha de Turan, a spokeswoman for the cooperative, said SWIFT recognizes the significant potential in blockchain and distributed ledger technologies and is exploring its use, but she added the technology still has some maturing to do. SWIFT also is part of Hyperledger, an open source project involving several banks and technology companies. COS is using Hyperledger for its new platform. So SWIFT is also part of Hyperledger, by the way. It's time for banks to push on and move from discussing the potential benefits of blockchain to making it a reality, said Julio Fora. Julio Fora is head of research and development at Banco Santander. Okay, so I think this is good news, you guys. I think by having the Federal Reserve and central bankers take a look at this old, antiquated, outdated system that the central banks and Federal Reserve and even the commercial banks all over the planet that they're using to get money back and forth is old and antiquated, and the hackers are getting into it without very little effort, and they're stealing as much money as possible, as often as possible. And we need to really take a look at blockchain and Bitcoin-based or Bitcoin-inspired technologies along with the blockchain to remedy that problem. So let's keep an eye on this particular situation and see how it evolves. Moving right along, the best messaging apps for privacy protection. Now, we did some investigation and some research for you guys. For those of you who know about Edward Snowden, Edward Snowden was the former National Security Agency contractor. He called Google's app Google Surveillance, okay, in a tweet, and some security experts recommended skipping the download, which was released last week. So Google came up with their own messaging app, and Google is calling it Google. Snowden is calling it Google surveillance, and I don't think he likes it very much. And he's again recommending that we skip the download of that particular app. Messaging services that are considered the most private exclusively use end-to-end encryption. So let me repeat this: the best messaging apps that we can use end-to-end encryption. That is, messages stay encrypted as they move from sender to recipient. Even if they pass through or are stored on a server, they are encrypted in a way that the service provider can't read them. Facebook's WhatsApp, Apple's iMessage, and the Signal app by Open Whisper Systems always use end-to-end encryption. So again, iMessage, WhatsApp, in addition to Signal, okay, by Open Whisper Systems. So those are the three at the top of the list. If you want end-to-end encryption, use those three, and you should be a lot better off as compared to using anything else. And again, we have a LinkedIn page where we have complete, comprehensive blog posts on the best messaging apps for privacy protection. So moving right along to another subject that you guys might find interesting. Is your financial advisor's firm hack resistant? Again, is your financial advisor's firm hacker resistant? Now, the reason why this is important is simply because we give our financial advisors, the people who manage investments and personal finances for us, for our companies, for our individual personal finances as well, we give them a lot of information and we put a lot of trust in those guys to keep our information safe and secure. But is it really safe and secure? Are you worried about the security of the personal financial data you handed off to a financial advisor? You should be. While 8 in 10 advisors say that cybersecurity is a high priority, only 44% of them say they fully understand the issues and risks, according to a new report from the Financial Planning Association's FPA Research and Practice Institute. Just 29% say they are fully prepared to manage and mitigate cybersecurity risks. So this is a big deal. Very few of them are actually prepared. And the survey, which will be discussed at the FPA BE conference in Baltimore, polled 1,015 financial advisors nationwide during July. The margin of error is plus or minus 3.07 percentage points. They see the regulators turning up the heat. They see the focus on the industry, said Byron Bass, Managing Director of Risk Oversight for TD Ameritrade Institutional, which sponsored the survey. The Securities and Exchange Commission's Office of Compliance Inspections and Examinations has issued requirements on cybersecurity preparedness. The Financial Industry Regulatory Authority also reviews firms' compliance on cybersecurity practices and rules. So this is big news. And check with your financial advisor and find out a few things about how that particular individual is handling your data. Okay? Now we're going to cover a few things that you may want to run past your financial advisor. Okay? Now I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but there's going to be a few things that you may want to ask your financial advisor. How do you protect my data? Okay? What you're looking for is just information about who touches it, who sees it, and who handles my data. Where will my data be stored, and who will have access to it? Okay? These are some things you want to ask. What happens to my data after our relationship ends? If you leave that firm, what are they going to do? What is the policy? How is it stated? Are they going to be destroying your data? Will they have the ability to hand it off to other companies or not? Okay, this should be articulated in their policy somewhere where you can read it. Have you ever been the target of a cyber attack? Okay, this is another very good question. And how do they handle that? How did they handle that cyber attack? How will you help me in the event of a breach? Okay, that's another good question. And don't overshare too much information with your financial advisor. Okay, Social Security numbers, etc. are very critical information. Make absolutely sure that if it's not necessary to give that up, then you don't need to give it up to them. I account numbers. Make sure you understand why he needs account numbers. If he needs to access your accounts, that's very critical that you understand whether or not there's any way you can still accomplish what you need to accomplish without giving that account numbers and such. If you're sending certain things, account statements, text returns to him, you can black out that type of critical information, says Matt Rogers, head of product for E8 number 8 Security, a cybersecurity analytics firm. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to question the need for such data. Ask, why do you need this? What are you going to use it for? Okay. You don't necessarily need to give your own login information to your financial advisors unless it's really critical. Okay. Usually they don't need to log in on your behalf into your financial brokerage firms, etc., etc. Secure data transmission. Make sure you understand that when you send information over to your financial advisor, you use a secure file transfer service, or if the firm has one, a secure client access portal. That'll be just fine. And set up communications protocols. For instance, if the advisor needs information from you, you typically don't want to get an email stating, click on this link and give me your social or your account numbers or something like that. Typically they can call you first, for instance, and let you know that they need information, and then you can set up a certain way to give it to him or her. Again, a secure access portal, file transfer system of some sort, but everything should be encrypted, HTTPS, for instance. And that way you cut down significantly on the opportunity that you could have a problem. So that pretty much wraps that part up about working with your financial advisor in terms of trying to find out whether or not they're hacker resistant, okay? And moving right along, stop online fraud with selfies and fingerprints. Again, stop online fraud with selfies and fingerprints. MasterCard is going to launch a biometric technology for verifying customer identities during online shopping transactions in the coming weeks with merchants and banks. The company has been testing facial and fingerprint recognition software called Identity Check in the Netherlands, Canada, and the U.S. as a way to combat growing online fraud. I think this is very good news, as Visa and MasterCard have pushed merchants and consumers to switch from credit cards that use magnetic strips to cards embedded with a computer chip that creates a unique code for each transaction. Retail fraud patterns have shifted. Okay, so for 33% of MasterCard merchants that have adopted chip technology, fraud from counterfeit cards has dropped by 54%, says AJ Ballig, president of Enterprise Security Solutions at MasterCard. Criminals have regrouped to focus on internet transactions where no physical card is used. So again, as we go online, that's where the vulnerabilities still are, and we're making progress as far as offline fraud is concerned. But now we need to make sure that online transactions hopefully will require that maybe like MasterCard is implementing. Maybe we could use a selfie. Maybe we can use fingerprints or biometrics with our laptops or our phones or our smartphones, etc., etc. So moving right along, okay, SSL is a protocol that, as Edward Snowden pointed out during a TED Talk, and I'll try to put the link to the video, most of the problems associated with information theft on the internet and people snooping in on our conversations and our web browsing and our shopping has to do with lack of SSL. So as we implement SSL on virtually every website, on virtually every page, we should be able to significantly cut down on snooping and people finding out or looking at what we're reading, what we're eating, what we're buying, etc., etc. That means every single session should be encrypted with SSL. There should be no reason why any single page shouldn't have a padlock indicating that you're reading on an Amazon book, whether or not you're shopping, whether or not you're just perusing some general information. There's no reason why we shouldn't even have those areas secured with SSL and a padlock on each and every website, each and every session. So let's see if we can get the industry, the browsers, the Microsofts, the Safari browsers, the Internet Explorers, everybody should be able to implement SSL for every single session, no matter what we're doing online. And this is a rather unique and interesting concept. DDoS protection as part of shared or managed hosting. In other words, VeriSign was talking about this themselves during a podcast. They were saying that if our hosting companies can make sure that we have DDoS protection, in other words, as part of your hosting services, your monthly services and features, that they can, if they can include DDoS protection, in other words, if the hackers of the world could have less opportunity to do direct denial of service attacks, then that should cut down significantly. And if we can get our hosting companies, whether or not it's a shared hosting company or managed, so let's go to GoDaddy, let's go to VeriSign, let's go to whatever hosting companies, web.com, whoever's hosting websites nowadays. Let's see if we can get them to implement DDoS protection. And whether or not, if they can include that in their basic hosting services and packages, then we probably can make the whole internet a better, more reliable, safe place for all of us. And cyber threats are mimicking what happens in the real world. Okay, so what that simply means is when hackers find a vulnerability, some malware that seems to get them in a system, in a company, and get information and still online, they typically use that method as quickly and as often as possible, wherever they can. And this is the same thing that happens in the physical world. So we could use the analogy of what happens and what we do in the physical world to do the same thing, or make sure that we counter the same problems that we encounter online. In other words, if I'm a burglar, if I'm a car thief or something, if I figure out how to get into a certain car, I'm going to hit as many cars, as many houses, as many buildings as possible, as quickly as possible. And this is the same thing that happens in the cyber world. When you find that you have malware that can get into a bank, a hospital, some corporate network, you're going to use that same solution to get into as many places as quickly as possible. So we need to understand that as we start countering these cyber threats, we need to make absolutely sure that we understand that this is going to be used elsewhere. So we need to share information from business to business, government agencies to private industry, and vice versa. So wherever possible, we can't have a situation where the federal government, the FBI, the CIA, NSA, or something is withholding information from corporate America or private industry or whatever in terms of vulnerabilities. That needs to be disclosed. The Tor browser vulnerability needs to be disclosed. Okay, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology has their own version of a Tor browser, from what I understand, and they need to understand that no particular solution is completely hack-proof, and we need to find out as much as possible the vulnerabilities associated with any of these browsers, and that needs to be shared, and that needs to be disclosed as quickly as possible. We can't have a lock or something that only works for certain people, and good people are not bad people, or something like this. Either it's a very good lock and it works all the time, or it doesn't. Okay, so the same with cybersecurity and preventing threats online or whatever. We need to make sure that we have encryption that works and works without exception. Okay, no matter who you are, no matter what's going on. That's the only way to make it the internet safe. Share information with no holds barred. Let's be real and let's be honest and straightforward without playing games online. Last Wednesday, moving right along, last Wednesday, the House, United States government, the House, passed the Improving Small Business Cybersecurity Act, which aims to provide small businesses with cybersecurity awareness and training programs through the Small Business Administration's Small Business Development Centers. Representative Richard Hanna, Republican out of New York, sponsored the bill with Derek Kilmer, Democrat of Washington, co-sponsoring this bill. Protect your business with cyber liability insurance from the NFIB. Okay, again, you can now for you small businesses like mine, you can now protect your business with cyber liability insurance from the NFIB, the National Federation for Independent Businesses. That's what the NFIB stands for, National Federation for Independent Businesses. It represents 325,000 small businesses in all 50 states and Washington, including Washington, D.C., and is dedicated to leveling the playing field with big businesses, big government, big labor in every key area, taxes, healthcare, regulations, and more. Okay, there are 28 million small businesses in the United States, and in recent years, they are increasingly becoming the victims of cyber attacks. Said Hannah, the reason for this is clear. Small businesses too often lack the resources or experience required to make prudent investments in cybersecurity. So this is really good news. You small businesses, check into cyber liability insurance. You may qualify for training. You may qualify for seminars, webinars, or whatever it takes to get your networks and your hardware, etc., tested out, inspected, and brought up to par, so that you can, we can do our part in terms of protecting our businesses and our customers, employees, etc., from cyber threats. Lastly, $121 million in ransom payments was collected, I think last year, or this year rather. A single ransomware author and distributor was able to collect $121 million in ransomware payments during the first half of this year, netting $94 million after expenses. It's kind of funny that we can trust we can trust a hacker to tell us the difference between net profit and gross profit. But let's just take these numbers for whatever, with a grain of salt, and conclude that maybe he netted $94 million actually out of the $121 million gross that he received from ransomware payments. Ransomware has grown over the years, and in 2015 and 16, we really saw a serious spike, said Vincent Wafer, Vice President of Intel Security's McAfee Labs, Threat Intelligence Center. CSO Threat Intelligence Survival Guide. Let's see. Okay, that's going in another direction here, so let's skip that. So anyway, that gives us an indication that ransomware is not going anywhere anytime soon, and we need to be prepared for it. To make sure that we understand that we need to do all we can, and by sharing information, testing out files, submitting suspicious malware, viruses, etc., to Google's Virus Total application and other similar applications online, web portals rather. Test out those files, test out those bits of coding, etc., and let's see if we can make a dent in the overall number of cyber issues that are going on. Okay, so I think finally, this is actually the last thing. The right to be forgotten ruling. Okay, the right to be forgotten refers to the European Union's interest in getting Google and Facebook and all these social media sites to understand they have an obligation or a commitment to remove our information from the internet if we request it. In other words, if I had some sort of situation where maybe I went to jail, maybe I had some sort of personal thing going on and it's been resolved or whatever, and I need to remove that information, otherwise it's going to make a bad impression on me, right? If people look for it. Technically, the European Union is saying, Google, Facebook, you guys, you got to remove this information from the internet and do your best to get rid of it. Otherwise, you're going to be subject to fines and penalties. And this is supposed to spread to the United States. Now, this basically means that information is deemed our information. It's our personal profile information that's on Google and Facebook and Twitter, etc., etc. And we have a right to determine what happens to it, how it's used, ultimately how it's marketed or advertised or whatever. So this puts back into the our court that this is our information, our videos, our pictures, our personal information, and Google and those guys are using it, are leasing it, or renting it from us, and until we tell them to go and remove it and or whatever, that's our privilege, that's our right. So check into the right to be forgotten ruling as initiated or executed by the European Union, because this is supposed to spread into the United States, and it's supposed to back or give us the ability to take back our information as our own. Okay, so you own it, it's yours, it's about you, and Facebook and those guys are using it to market and make money, but they're leasing it, they're renting it technically from us, and we're supposed to be able to tell them what to do, how to do it, and whether or not they can do it at all. So this is important, because this is going to affect the entire business model of Google and Facebook and Twitter and all those guys, whoever it is, if we take control like we're supposed to, as being determined by this particular right to be forgotten ruling. Okay, that's what it stands for: the ability to own our information and take it back, and make sure that we understand that we have a say-so in terms of how it's used and where it's used and all that. Okay, so it's been a pleasure bringing you guys this live session. And as usual, during the conclusion of each and every session, we say, share it with a friend, relative, enemy, associate, and we welcome you back to the next session. And you guys have a safe evening, and thanks and take care. Bye.